The war between Russia and Ukraine is no longer limited to Ukrainian territory. Ukraine is shaking Russia from within by moving the front line behind Moscow. According to the latest reports, Ukraine launched an airstrike on a critical airbase from which Russia launches kamikaze drones like the Shahed. Ukrainian forces carried out a surprise raid with drones on an airbase in Krasnodar Krai in southwestern Russia. The Krasnodar airbase is in flames after a massive attack. Explosions, fires, and sirens gave residents a nightmare in the dark of night. This raid has had an unprecedented impact on the Russian front line for a long time, because it was precisely from here that kamikaze Shahed drones were taking off every day against Ukraine. Although Kremlin officials claimed that the target had suffered minor damage, images shared by local residents showed ammunition caches bursting into flames and thick smoke. The Russian Defense Ministry remained silent in the first hours of the news, then said it was a minor case of a drone. However, Ukrainian sources say that the airbase runway has been rendered unusable and some of the fighter jets stationed there have been badly damaged. So how does this affect Russia? What are Ukraine's intentions? What is being said in the West? Can these developments change the course of the war? And how will Putin put out the fire? All this and much more now. The attack on the Krasnodar airbase is just one example of many that are taking place deep inside Russia. In 2024 and 2025, Ukraine is developing its long-range drone capability to penetrate into the heart of Russian territory. There have already been explosions and fires in Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk, Ryazan, Engels, and other regions. While the Kremlin has often tried to downplay these incidents as minor sabotage attempts, videos that have appeared on the internet and images shared by Russian residents clearly show the seriousness of the situation. The explosions are so violent that even in the surrounding districts, tremors have been felt. Power outages have occurred, and air defense sirens in the regions have been wailing into the morning. Russia's airbase in Krasnodar was seen as a key target for Ukraine. This is because the Russian military has been launching Iranian kamikaze drones, called Shaheds, almost every day against Ukrainian cities. These drones were especially damaging civilian infrastructure, attacking power plants, power lines, and critical facilities. Ukraine focused on increasing its air defense capacity to prevent this situation. However, no matter how strong its air defenses are, directly targeting the source of the attacks, namely the Russian base, is a much bigger strategic gain. With this attack, the security depth that the Russian military thought was behind has been eroded. Even Moscow is no longer completely immune from Ukraine's long-range strikes. Indeed, drones have been spotted near Moscow before, and explosions have even been heard over the Kremlin.
Ukraine of attacking Moscow with several drones overnight.
But the Krasnodar raid is seen as part of a continuous operation. In other words, Ukraine has started to organize more frequent and more effective raids into Russia's interior. This is having a huge impact on the front line. Russian soldiers are demoralized because they are losing a sense of security even on their own territory. In addition, the Russian command may be forced to withdraw air defense elements from the front line or position them backwards in order to prevent these attacks. This could lead to a weakening of Russian troops on the ground. Ukraine has long pursued a strategy of destroying Russian military infrastructure and logistics through precision strikes behind enemy lines. For several months now, Kyiv has become even more aggressive in this regard. Drone raids on Russian oil refineries, naval drone attacks against the Black Sea Fleet, and now spot operations against air bases in the interior all serve the same purpose: logistically and psychologically cripple the Russian war machine. Another aim of these attacks is to disrupt the resources Russia uses for the invasion. For example, when oil refineries are hit, Russia struggles to deliver uninterrupted fuel to its frontline tanks, armored vehicles, and air assets. Similarly, the disabling of the airbase in Krasnodar renders the runway from which the Shahed drones take off and the supply points there unusable. This could reduce the frequency of drone strikes on Ukrainian cities. Ukraine also prefers to suppress Russian aggression on its territory through active offense rather than passive defense. In other words, they act with the logic of destroy the weapons attacking you wherever they originate. This not only reduces the attack capacity of the opponent, but also sends a message to the world public opinion that will undermine the image of Russia's empire of fear. The Ukrainian military continues to use drones to strike oil refineries and logistics centers in Russia. In the last few months, Ukraine has repeated these operations almost every week, reducing Russian oil processing capacity by 46%. Russia earns huge revenues from energy exports, which are used to finance the war. So, as refineries and pipelines are hit, the Russian economy takes a big hit. To compensate, the Kremlin is trying to sell more discounted oil to countries such as China and India. But sanctions and logistical obstacles prevent exports from reaching the desired level. Meanwhile, the US and the EU are discussing the possibility of allocating the proceeds from frozen Russian assets, or the assets themselves, to the reconstruction or armament of Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly voiced this idea. Signals from within the Donald Trump administration indicate that they are open to this proposal, but that legal procedures may take time. Meanwhile, the eastern front of Ukraine, especially the Pokrovsk sector of Donetsk Oblast, is one of the regions where Russia is trying to exert intense pressure. Pokrovsk is a critical logistical node for the region. If the Russian army captures Pokrovsk, it may have the chance to penetrate deep into the Donetsk line and divide the Ukrainian defense line. Ukrainian generals have long warned about the possible consequences of Pokrovsk's fall. According to recent reports, Russian troops have changed tactics near Pokrovsk. They are creating a sense of encirclement around the city through infiltration operations with small, lightly armed teams and intense artillery fire. In response, the Ukrainian High Command has deployed additional troops and ammunition to the area. In particular, the 59th Assault Brigade and the 65th Brigade are strengthening the defenses around Pokrovsk. The loss of this city, which Ukraine says, "We will never let fall," could give Russia a huge advantage in the east. In the direction of Pokrovsk, more than 15,000 Russian soldiers have been neutralized in the last few weeks, according to Ukrainian sources. About half of the dead are mobilized soldiers. There have also been a large number of prisoners and desertions. This situation reinforces allegations of indiscipline and demoralization in the Russian army. Reports of desertions in units such as Russia's 1437th Motorized Rifle Regiment are increasing. Initially, it is known that convicted soldiers taken from prisons were put on the front lines. However, as these soldiers suffered high casualties in bloody clashes, those left behind began to desert or rebel. It is even known that there are some who are considering crossing over to the Ukrainian side by applying to the "I Want to Live" project. Some Russian commanders have limited means at their disposal, forcing soldiers to fight with fear or beatings. But this method is also starting to backfire. According to numerous sources, there are wounded soldiers being sent back to the front in punishment camps set up behind the front lines. In particular, a report from the Kemerovo region says that those who are wounded or sick but deemed usable are immediately sent to the front. These camp allegations reveal the humanitarian plight of the Russian army. The Western Alliance is gradually expanding its military support packages for Ukraine. Canada and the United Kingdom are discussing new support for Kyiv. Finland has announced 200 million euros in arms and equipment aid. Italy's parliament extends military aid until 2025. The US and Germany are also announcing additional aid one after the other. US sources are even planning to buy weapons for Ukraine from the interest on Russia's frozen assets or part of these funds. All this means making Ukraine militarily strong, supplying it with ammunition, armored vehicles, air defense systems, and perhaps even high-tech F-16s. Ultimately, the Ukrainian army's long-term resistance on the ground depends on this international support. In particular, the deployment of Patriot air defense systems in Ukraine has reduced the impact of Russian missiles and drone attacks. Additional Patriot stocks are now planned to provide even stronger protection. Ukraine's attacks are reaching into Russia's hinterland and may continue. Ukraine is emphasizing a strategy of direct strikes wherever the threat originates. Russia would like to retaliate with a tougher response, but its stockpiles of missiles and drones are in danger of being depleted. The Russian military's reserve mobilization resources also seem to have reached their limits. The situation in Pokrovsk is critical. If Russian forces are aiming for a siege or a quick offensive there, the coming weeks will be the hottest period of fighting. Ukraine may deploy all its deterrents to avoid losing this city once and for all. On the other hand, demoralization, desertions, and logistical problems on the Russian side are making the war even more difficult. There are also diplomatic initiatives, but no clear peace negotiations are on the horizon. The EU, G7, and NATO countries are saying, "We will continue to support Ukraine," while Russia is moving forward with the thesis, "Let Ukraine lay down its arms, and then we can negotiate." Perhaps neither side expects the war to stop until a certain level of attrition is reached. It seems that in the coming months, the dose of deep operations in Ukraine may increase. Russian air bases, warehouses, energy facilities, and even major cities will continue to be the target of Ukrainian drones. This will put more strain on Russian defense systems. On the front line, both sides will experiment with new tactics and make moves to both siege and resist. The attack on the Krasnodar airbase has once again shown how fragile Russia's security, which it thought was behind, is in fact. This is a development that affects not only the front line, but also Russia's internal psychology. The fierce fighting around Pokrovsk proves that Ukraine is determined to defend a critical city at all costs. Russia's inhumane mobilization strategy, desertions and capitulations are reducing the army's resilience. On the other hand, weapons sent by Western allies and drone sabotage operations by the Ukrainian army are trying to cut Russia's logistical arteries. Although it is understood that the war is not going to end in the near future, the picture is changing every day, leading to an important turning point. Ukraine's behind-the-scenes attacks and determined defense of its critical cities could upset Russia's plans. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for following us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like to be informed about the continuation of our content and to support us.